Alright, this is analyzing 6 low-density structure builds from Factorio's Space Age. I'm looking at how the builds performed based on 10-hour runs of data. Now if you play Factorio, this is going to get into mechanics on how quality works. Might take this as a spoiler warning. Before this, it was a description of builds. I've got reactions to numbers, but this is getting into how to get great results from simulations. So if you want to crack at that, for non-Factorio players, that's a few hours of research based on cost alone, and then you go with whatever math skills you've picked up in life. I don't want to spoil the fun of that time learning. But I also think that this problem deserves some clarity. So really quick, here's an infographic of what the builds are. In case you just skipped this far, this will get you caught up as to what the module mixes are and why. As a note, based on my sources, I'm calling Konages Table F the wiki's build because it's seen on the Factorio wiki. Konages Table I is the item build for LDS. I don't know who made what, and Konage is a YouTuber who is also my best source of information on this so far. I don't have a way to correctly attribute who came up with this idea first at this time. With 10 hours, I can make ratios of how well these builds work, and maybe extend the results. This is all in a spreadsheet, and there's going to be a link in the description. If you think this is worth a coffee, the link goes directly to a spreadsheet because I want to expedite understanding at this point. With blueprints and the save file of these runs, it's a little bit different. Now, doing this, there were emotional responses, but it's time to look for relations in my data and treat every build like a loved child. And I respect all my builds, but the ugly ones are funnier. So here's what the data tells us right away. At level 0, LDS productivity research, you're not getting a benefit. We can use our initial cycles to make these better relative to other LDS builds, but for raw materials, it's a source of disappointment. Judging by the fluid use rates we are given, I mean, compared to what we can do elsewhere, yeah, you wouldn't know you're putting in this many raw materials to get this few items out per second, unless you tried out the copper plates and the steel builds. But since we have, it's just like, oh wow, we've done this complicated thing and it just doesn't work. So at level 0, we're going to play this for LDS, because we still want body armors, but building this for another purpose would be moot. Science only gives a 6 times bonus at this point. Even with everything you can stack onto it, you'll figure out that you're just pouring resources down the drain really fast. Now, we go to level 15. It's better, alright, how much? 16 times better if you compare our standard benchmark novice build. Okay, now we're competing with copper. Still no joy on science. But we can start to use any of these builds for raw materials. Some builds are better than others, though. Particularly the items build. It made a bad first impression, but it's the funny ugly kid that grows up strong. At 22, we see a 4 times relative bonus, so gone from about 15, 16 times to about 52 times, I believe. on the basis of my data. All of these builds are going to win. Even the underperforming build is going to win. Although first impressions are correct, 2C is just going to underperform throughout this entire series. That one is relatively weak compared to its siblings. The Novice series looks worse for now, but that's because we loaded in environment modules that don't benefit the build in our runs, just to get a benchmark. If you think about it, there's no quality on those buildings, but they can be more productive. That's going to change our rate of fluid. That would be fair. We can just calculate that, though, at this time. At level 30, it's going to be the same story. 4 times relative bonus. Fastest build is now producing 2 LDS a second, with enough parts to make 2 more. And that says we'll get 4 LDS. That makes sense. Our build at the first produces 4 LDS. When we break it down, it's going to become 4 LDS, because our recycler is going to divide by 4 to make 1 set of parts, which gets multiplied by 4. And this process is just going to continue to go until we get a full batch of parts. Now we're looking at something like a 223 times bonus. On the basis of that, though, that seems a bit off. It is different from Konages build. And if you look at the table for D, that's different. What I did was I went, but is it different than my basic instinct benchmarks build? It isn't. I came within 5% of that build, and then I decided to see if I couldn't do the same thing for the rest of Konages' tables. I'm within 5% of his F and his I. So basically, if I'm wrong, a jury won't convict me, because I'm seeing less than 1 in 12 error here. At higher levels, the greater probability bonuses probably skew this ratio. So if I go up to 15, that's like using a super machine that I can't get any other way. And when we look at relative levels, the rate of growth being proportional like it is, and always being a power of 4, shows exponential increases of behavior. So, well, let's look at that. I can look at a 1.5 bonus foundry and say, well, that's going to be like buying 5 levels of research. And I can look at the rate of return of a 24.8% assembler on Konages' table, and it's the same range. So this is holding through nearly all of the levels. What I did was go, well, what would a game dev do? We're given this as a 2.5 multiple each time. This is an artificial product, right? Somebody who's human has to be able to manipulate it. And what I found was this. I could bracket it. I could see one fact and another fact, and then arrive in the area of another relationship. There's a physicist called Feynman who would call it triangulation. That's very nice. I'm an army brat. We bracket. So what we have here is modules that do 24.8% though. What I did was I said, let's take this up 6 levels. And the idea is that 30 divided by 5 is 6. So at the max level, I saw 244.14. If I use 2.48, that's 232.65. And I found that if I went 6 times productivity research divided by 30, and then raised to that power, I would get a result that was also incredibly close. So, if you're a mathematician, this is my win, but I'm a hobbyist. It's not my job to go, this is super perfect. I feel it's my job to say, there's something here that's beautiful to show to other people. I think a mathematician is either going to be able to solve this between 2 minutes or enough to get some credit. And I might be silly for putting so much energy into it because it's my hobby, but it's going to be a mathematician's win, and I'm fine with that. Mathematically beautiful results. What are we here for? We are here for loot. This is a video game. If we tally up parts, we do that to see what makes the most loot. But that's why we mentioned the productivity modules. We can take them from a 1.5 rate to a 2.5 rate. And when we do that, well, now we'll drop fluid down to 3600 or 4800. And then, well, we've already got a build that's outcompeting everything on the basis of items. Surprise, surprise. Oh, and by the way, when you make an LDS out of legendary parts, it still gets all productivity researches applied to it. When you look at that and imagine crafting all of the items, as I did in the raw section of the data, well, now that's interesting. We've got something that's probably going to overperform when we do what we did with steel and make it all the same proportional rate. So yeah, it's not going to look as good at 3,600. That's because I'm not putting as much into it. So if you imagine scaling this up to a fully productive assembly line, some interesting things happen. At level 0, 24.8% quality and 50% productivity just wins in general. What I did to analyze this is I made tables of the raw materials and then imagined what would happen if I built LDS out of all of the steel divided by 2, because it's 2 steel to make an LDS, and then applied productivity bonuses based off of research. Or I break down all my LDS and quarter it. So what that means is I'm going to add some materials to another material and get a total. That's going to be 20 divided by 4, and then that gets added to copper. And I'll use that for my benchmark there. I figure since I have more copper, that's more data. And what we see is that at level 0, build 2A wins, but after that, forget about it. It's either the wiki's build or the items build, depending on whether you're going after low-density structures or items. Except the items builds wins in more categories. Particularly once you get to level 20, it's going to start to win because there's a machine in the back that is going to manufacture at 400% total productivity. When that gets quartered, it's going to return everything you put in as a part. So it's like the recycler does nothing at that point, and it goes around in a consistent cycle, which gives us the same amount of materials back. Could we use that fact? Absolutely. Is that new information? It's actually pretty well known about. We'll see it in the next video. There's a controversial technique that relies on it. Once we get to 30, the only thing that really matters is how fast you go. So, Novice and Novice B just win. Presumably, if we got Novice B to level 25, it would get to the point where it was producing a constant amount of items sooner. And it's the same effect where 300% productivity plus 100% normal divided by 4, that's all one part. That's 100%. Is this fair? The game was designed over 2 years. They did this while making simulations of spaceships. I'm pretty sure this question was asked. But we're going to see a huge rate of production on all of the builds that we do. It's all just going to be based on speed at that point. And at that point, we've spent millions of research for this. 191 million for the final level at level 30. So who wins in general? Because we can take that as a special and maybe an inspirational case. But who really wins? So, on LDS, maximum productivity wins overall. On assembly lines that benefit from productivity differently, they don't have a research attached to them, or we can't get an item back due to a chemical change, like steel, it's going to be different. The careful optimizations that we're doing at level 0 are producing a result. They're only losing because we're coming to meet that result and augment it with a research that allows us to produce a superior quantity of material with a recipe that allows quality to be applied throughout the process, even while being productive. Some ideas are going to lose. Notably, 2C's a loser. 2A and 2B didn't look like they would lose over time, did they? Would you guess that adding another quality control step wouldn't have helped in 15 expensive levels? And that being simple would have gotten the job done? A clever optimization still does work. Shuffling around productivity in Konages build had an outstanding effect. So this is very much a case-by-case thing, but it suggests there's a specific point where we could win. If all of this has sounded like a good time, and the quality math tutorial on the wiki doesn't scare you, or even if it does, but you can see the pride somebody could take by just having somebody go over their numbers and say, no, first impressions, I can get to a beautiful result. And you know what? You've done right. Well, the pride's yours for the taking. I'll hazard to guess I'll get old before Konage. But without his help, I couldn't be a fool with the numbers and have this much fun. So, that's a mathematician's ultimate win. The wiki's build wins pretty well overall. It's the basis for all comparisons here. The items build ends up overperforming, but due to research bonuses, that's going to fall off somewhere after level 20, because if you think about it, the more we shuffle productivity into our production line at high levels, the closer we're going to get to that 300% number. We could push Konage's idea with that tweak at the end of the line a little bit further. Is this novel? Absolutely not. Known about for a real long time. But we're going to see what it is because it's somewhat controversial. It's going to be covered next episode. The question is, how much research do we need to win? With LDS, there's a specific answer. Another technique, there's a different one. Both of these have been known about since December, November. But for LDS, we're going to hit a point where we can get productivity and everything at level 20. That's going to be just short of 10 million research of every kind. Well, how easy is that? Well, we can divide that by 3 different bonuses to get an estimate of 1.25 million. Coming from 2 different planets. Now, if you do that at a production rate, you can then multiply that number by skews like how many errors you think you're going to make, or how long you think it will take for you to learn this. And then divide that by a ballpark estimate of, well, how many game sessions do I think this is fair? I would suggest that looking at rates of about 2040 to 4080 items per minute. And I'm personally going to go for something like 3,000. That's about 100 items per second. But that is after productivity. So that's one of those 2x bonuses right there. The other 2 are going to gradually get applied, and I'm going for over 1 million items per hour at that point. The reason why you want this is because once you factor in all the time it's going to take you, it's a difficult task. Compared to everything else, the win condition for this game occurs before we take on this problem. And it is going to be 100 hours to get the silver medal achievement in Factorio Space Age, 40 hours to get gold, so just keep that in mind. That's what the top skilled players are supposed to be aiming for. And this level of quality is probably going to be done right after you're capable of winning. Maybe you'll go for something else, but you'll be capable of winning. It's a new skill, though, and even for somebody who's been playing Factorio for years, it pays to be humble and appreciate this task for all of the options that it presents you with. Next time, we're going to cover the LDS shuffle and some methods that stand to compete with it. That's being discussed as something to be balanced, so I think it's fair to discuss alternatives. And maybe put it in the context of what's understood now and what could be effective if somebody had to redesign their factory. After that, we'll look at LDS cast, and when we look at that, you'll see really quickly if the game devs are considering the LDS shuffle as something to be balanced, it's because LDS cast